This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And we are finally here. The table is set. NBA Finals is now upon us. And it will be the Indiana Pacers taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I am sure the NBA pundits, those who are about the big ratings when it comes to watching NBA playoff basketball, NBA Finals basketball, sports entertainment, are just shrugging their shoulders and are just kind of like, WTF. But you know what? Shaw and I, we here for it. And I'm pretty sure that if you were watching the whole NBA playoffs run for both of these teams respectively, you would be here for it as well too. And it's only apropos that if we come to this point of the NBA season, it's culminated, that it arguably would be the two best playing teams that are going into the NBA Finals, and not simply because of the names. So let me go ahead and rock the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawswest.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, my brother? That smirk on your face is telling me that you about it. So I'm supposing that we're going to feel good about our discussion in previewing the NBA Finals.
I just love basketball, and I love the surprises that this NBA season has given us and bestowed upon us for what I'm calling the unexpected NBA Finals. And that's not to be dismissive in any way. I just think, the betting odds makers did not have Indiana and OKC as your NBA finalists. It just didn't happen. So the Indiana Pacers have gone on to, really prove me wrong, in a variety of ways over the course of the season. And it's fun. I'm excited about, their opportunities here. So I'm just excited to talk basketball. The NBA Finals are upon us. It's been a long and very interesting and peculiar season. And I think this is apropos, if you will, that we're getting something that we didn't expect as the NBA Finals here in mid-June.
Look, you're my boy, right? We've been doing this for quite some time. And I don't want to belabor our conversation because I do want the attention to be on the things that we are looking forward to with regards to this matchup, which I really think is about as intriguing a matchup as you will probably get over the last 5 years as far as the dynamics of what these two teams bring to the table. But I know that you've been saying, hey, they proved me wrong. Look, you just weren't a believer in the Indiana Pacers and the makeup of this team in comparison to what we essentially have said were among the better teams. But what I am appreciating about what the NBA has done through the course of this year and what we're actually seeing with the implementation and the way that things have changed and evolved, they want they want parity. Right. And while a lot of people are poo-pooing the idea of it, this is why you want the parity. And you want the parity kind of as a precursor. You want it, reflective in what we're seeing as you're going through that process of watching an NBA season. I don't think you would have just instantly said the Indiana Pacers, given what they showed us at the beginning of the season to what they look like at the end of the season with minimal changes. It was more of like it was a wake-up call. Right. So I'm not going to sit there and let you just basically be like, yo, Shaw, yeah, that's right. You were completely off on it or whatever the case may be. They had a lot of proving to do. Right. Because I think a lot of people had a right to feel like this was kind of an overrated team, or maybe they overachieved because they just did not come out looking like the team that surprised us last year. And it's not like we haven't seen that before. Now, with all that being said, we were kind of questioning whether or not OKC was that team. Right. Because they underachieved last year, right? People didn't buy into them being that number one seed. They come out the gate. They're among the best teams going, and they hit a stump in the road a couple of times when they dealt with the Cleveland Cavaliers. People believed that the Cleveland Cavaliers were the best team, right? When we saw that matchup earlier this year, and we saw the Cleveland Cavaliers is basically take them to the tool shed at the land. And then OKC showed us their resiliency. They showed us that they learned from their mistakes. They learned from the losses that they took. They came back and they just basically put a spanking on Cleveland. And then we said to ourselves, oh, wow. Now the question is, are the Boston Celtics, in a position where they can actually repeat? Because it just looks like if OKC is that kind of team, are the Celtics really about being that type of team to defend their championship? So there were so many storylines going on, Shaw. And this is what I love, that we have gotten it to this point where we can truly say, you know what, when it was all said and done, when we wipe all of this down and you take off all the injuries and all the excuses, the Pacers were one of the hottest teams in the second half of the season, and they carried it into the playoffs, and they won the games that mattered the most to get them to this point. The Oklahoma City Thunder, for them to be as viable as a finals participant, they had to go through a roadblock. And that roadblock was one of the former champions in the Denver Nuggets. I think that series proved to us that if they go out and do what they were put together to do, they would be one of the best teams in the NBA and would be one of the participants in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, you said a lot, and I actually want to throw it back to, the aspect of these two teams doing what they needed to do. Keith Smith, friend of the show, and a lot of, I think, of the smarter NBA podcasts, ones that are not just kind of like clickbaity or the case to be, they've latched onto this tweet by Keith Smith, where he indicated that this is going to be the first NBA Finals in the luxury tax era that both teams were not luxury tax players. So this is smart team building, drafting, coaching, player development, all of the things. And none of these teams, and they won't be this way forever, but as of this NBA Finals, none of these teams, neither of these two teams are luxury taxpayers. That is amazing. And that is amazing. And I think, OKC and Indiana, they made really smart trades. Obviously, OKC getting SGA and the Paul George trade. There's the Paul George angle that a lot of NBA Twitter is hanging on to as well, too. These are two former Paul George teams as well. But then the Haliburton for Sabonis trade, from Indiana. Then they get Siakam the next year later, or whatever the case would be. Like, really well-constructed teams who deserve to be here. And I'm not taking anything away from them anymore at all in any aspect or any way, form, because I love basketball. I love that these two teams represent basketball. And while it's not the air quote sexiest finals in terms of market size or whatever the case may be, these are the two best teams standing. And that's what you always want.
Listen, for all these people out there that love, to inject, quote unquote, the trash talking aspect of what we do. And what I'm talking about is, you look at these teams and they don't exhibit, quote unquote, the star power that I think people are trying, to elevate when we attach ourselves to the NBA and the marketability of the NBA. But look at these two teams, Shaw. These are thoroughbreds, right? The Oklahoma City Thunder have proven that they can run with any team if they want to. Notice I said if they want to, but they don't have to. They believe that they're good enough that if you want to go half court, we can half court you. You want to go all out track meet, we can run with you. And we'll run with you 15 deep if we have to, right? There are players that showed up in this Western Conference Finals that you probably have not heard their names up until they got into the playoffs. And they're Daigneault, and you can clearly tell that he's elevated himself as a coach in when he is implementing and deploying the roster and what he needs his guys to go out and do, and they're going out and doing it. The Cason Wallaces, the Kendrick Williams, these dudes, you don't hear them all throughout but he's played them. He's played them if you were paying attention to them, and they found minutes. He found minutes for them, critical situations where it was needed. Not about just giving guys a blow, not out of necessity or desperation, but out of the strategic aspect of what the OKC Thunder needed to do for them to win a game or win a series. And that, to me, it speaks volumes. And I give the same credit to Rick Carlisle. When he felt like a matchup was not in his favor, even if he had marginally playable guys, he still put them out there with confidence that they are doing something that is going to benefit them when it came down to closing out that series against the New York Knicks. And that, to me, is the kind of things you want to see coming into an NBA Finals, where all of these components that you're measuring up and trying to say who has the advantage of this, that, and the third, if it's not being shown or implemented any course through their run, it will always be a question mark, and it will always probably be against them if it's not being displayed at some point.
Yeah, I think that's another great point. These are also the two deepest teams left. And that's important. That's I think on purpose, right? These coaches went deep into their bench. They went deep into their bench all season long. And in some cases they were forced. Chet and Hartenstein all missed injuries. Various times. I think Jay Williams missed some time as well too. Both Jay Williams actually. In OKC, Naismith missed time. Nembhard missed time. So I think the Pacers and the Thunder understood the need for a deep bench, but ultimately that allowed them to be trustworthy into those guys 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Thomas Bryant, 3 threes, and, in the closeout game of game 6, basically getting out of the doldrums of the Miami Heat bench where he just wasn't getting any run. And he hits big threes, in essence, that kind of stemmed the tide, especially in that first half. Like, listen, I respect the roster construction. I respect the organizations that are in this NBA Finals. And I think I'll piggyback off what you said one more time. Be damned what all the pundits are saying. Be damned what NBA fans are saying. Like, oh, this is going to be a boring finals. I'm not going to watch. Cool. Don't watch. I think you're going to miss out on some great basketball. But if that's your choice because you don't have the air quote marquee guys or names that you're used to, this is exactly what the NBA wanted. They wanted the aspect of trying to bring in new blood, and now having these small and mid-market teams in the NBA Finals is an amazing situation. SGA is an MVP, Tyrese Haliburton, all the aspects of whether or not he's a lead guy and all the other stuff or whatever the case may be. Is he overrated? At this point, what more can you say? He's made it to the NBA Finals with a team that is extremely well constructed, but is definitely built in his image and his likeness in terms of his leadership and getting the pace up and down the basketball court.
Golly, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, our NBA Finals preview. I mean, we were just right out the gate. We were just all about talking about it, right? Forget a plug. You people know who we are. You know what we've been doing. We've been doing it all season long and for all 12 plus years, right? Like, we've been doing this, right? So you know where to find us. You know where to catch us. One thing, and then, obviously we're going to, drop into a quick break, and then we'll get into the gist of, where we think the keys to the game is, to who might actually have an advantage, may have a disadvantage. And then ultimately we'll, give our picks. One thing that I think I'm really, really, really looking forward to, what has intrigued me about this series is the way that both of these teams are manufacturing their points. Okay. Right now, like, a lot of the really high-ended, well-respected analysts are looking at this as an offensive versus defensive matchup, right? Like, because the Indiana Pacers are the kind of team that can run up 130 points. But I want people to really understand the Oklahoma City Thunder is equally as well, too, are scoring north of 120-something points. And a lot of it comes down to what they're forcing the other teams to not be able to do. And what we saw in this last series with the Indiana Pacers is they are finding ways for them to hit those quote unquote, those quotas, right? Of them hitting those 120 points, but they're doing it at the expense of the opposition's mistakes, which is making them as equally a formidable team as the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think what it does now come down to is, are the Pacers able to consistently do that to win 4 of 7 games, right? Because I don't think there'll ever be a question about what OKC is capable of doing. They have been doing this, and they do it with consistency. Now, there'll be times where, somebody cracks the Da Vinci Code on the OKC Thunder defense, and there are times where the OKC Thunder offensively get too kind of hung up on their own. But I want to see, can the Indiana Pacers as equally reflect that same level of defensive intensity on a team that equals them when you look at the matchups and the way that they're situated and how these offenses are executed? Because to me, that could very much be a toss-up. And then it really comes down to basketball IQ, execution, and better shot selection and decision-making, which I will say I question the Indiana Pacers a lot more than I probably do the Oklahoma City Thunder. But I'm going to leave that part for you, Shaw, to kind of weigh in and chime in on, because through there we'll segue into where we see these X factors and the matchups and who probably has the advantage over who when it comes to the total roster, and then giving our picks.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, it's a great opportunity for us to understand the machinations of all of these teams. So both these teams 12-4, getting into, and I think the 12-4 look very different, obviously, in terms of how we got here. OKC, as you said before, and as we've said, forged by fire with the Denver Nuggets in that series. while the Pacers more or less have been able to, I'd say, truly dominate almost every one of their matchups. 6 games, very close 6 games, and the game one probably turned that series around for them ultimately when the New York series or whatever. But they haven't faced elimination yet, right? And I think that's just a different situation than OKC. But again, we still get here with 12-4 records. Both teams who are offensively capable, defensively capable. Indiana really turned up the defense on this Knicks team and it's forced a lot of turnovers. And that's something that I think when we come back from the break, something that will be a great part of the conversation to kind of figure out, who's more reliant on their defense to turn into offense, or who should be ultimately, and who will be able to just kind of be able to sustain their normal offense, right? Can they run the half court offense and execute in a way that will be efficient enough in essence to get W's in the series? So cannot wait to dive into that conversation. But again, 2 teams, 12-4, very different looks, but same results here, NBA finalists.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our special edition of The Baseline NBA Finals preview, Indiana Pacers, Oklahoma City Thunder. Coming up, Shaw and I will break down some of those nuances, where the advantages play for either team, and then ultimately, you got to pick a winner, right? So you don't want to miss it here on The Baseline.
Time to break it down.
To the bone gristle.
We are back. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast, NBA Finals preview, Oklahoma City Thunder, Indiana Pacers. And just before we hit our break, Shaw, you alluded to one of the things that I think was really important is which team is going to have to heavily rely on their defense to allow them more opportunities for shots, allow them to force the other team to really appreciate the amount of shot attempts that they will have to be efficient in order to maintain and hang. And I think it's a really great way to kind of look into, have the Indiana Pacers caught up. We can safely say throughout the course of the run for the Oklahoma City Thunder, their defense among really, and I'm sure that there will be, metrics that will speak to it on historical levels. I don't want to go as far as to say they are the greatest defense that's ever played. I'm not really buying that because I think when you look at who you're playing against, the level of the competition that you're playing against, I think that speaks volumes. I will say that they are definitely one of the most effective defensive teams that we have seen in recent history, with the way that all of them have had an intricate part in being able to affect those numbers. The Oklahoma City Thunder, without question to me, would be the team that offers the most consistency to come out and play defensive, intense basketball for 48 minutes through and through. And even though the results may not speak to saying, okay, you're holding a team to 70 points, 80 points, it's the quality of shot and the amount of opportunities they're giving themselves in order for them to beat the other team that I think resonates with me. And it's something that I wonder, this series that we saw with the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks, while the Indiana Pacers definitely improved as far as what they show, defensively, I wonder if whether or not a lot of it as well, too, just came down to who they were playing against and the fact that they weren't attentive to details and not making themselves turn the ball over. So I wonder now with this Oklahoma City Thunder team, do they nullify that aspect with the Pacers?
Yeah, so I'll throw a couple of numbers at you. These are, obviously the 2 last teams in the NBA, and the numbers are going to skew towards them because of just kind of like where they're at. But Oklahoma City really relies on defense, and defense, in essence, to turn into offense, as I was saying before the break. So roughly 24 points per game in the playoffs they're getting based off of turnovers. Like they're scoring those points off of turnovers, 24 of those points. Indiana, conversely, getting 19 points off of turnovers. So what I'm interested to see here is the fast breaking style of Indiana, while their pace hasn't necessarily reflected everything that we think to be true about them, because right now they're at a pace of only 99 throughout the course of the playoffs. OKC is actually playing at a faster pace in the playoffs at roughly like a 100.1. But in theory, Indiana is running up and down. Well, that negate the opportunities for OKC, in essence, to swipe, to strip, to really stand guys up, if you will, to double and, come from the weak side and strip a Miles Turner if you think he's going to go over that right shoulder or whatever the case may be. That's something that I think the Indiana Pacers and Carlisle will look at heavily. Do they really need to turn it up, right? But sometimes you can play too fast, and playing too fast can also obviously lead to turnovers. So they won't be live ball turnovers, maybe in essence, which OKC often obviously really thrives off of as well too. But are they throwing the ball out of bounds, so to speak, and now all of a sudden not getting as many possessions? That's something that I think will be a really, really determining factor into how this playoffs or this finals will actually finish out. On the conversely, though, Indiana has been able to pick things up. And I think with Nembhard and Nesmith playing as well as they are at the point of attack, are they going to be able to force SGA to kind of give up the ball, right? And then will guys be available in the passing lanes? This is a different series for Miles Turner. I don't know if it's more of the Hartenstein or if he's going to be more on Chet. And then also OKC likes to play, kind of like Chet at the 5 sometimes, and allow them to have more spacing, with some of those smaller guys because they're not worried about giving up things defensively. That's where I'm so intrigued at the cross matching of what Indiana is going to do defensively here to see if they can still get a leg up in the defense that I think has been much improved from where they were in December and January. Like, this is a much different team than they were, 5 months ago now. And will that be able to turn OKC over and turn fast break points in favor of the Indiana Pacers?
I want to be positive about the Indiana Pacers. So I apologize to you, Shaw, and to anybody who's probably going to be listening to this and thinking I'm like hating on the Pacers when I say this. Okay. I'm concerned that the matchup with the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks will give the Pacers this foolish idea that they can go out and defensively execute the way that they did with Jalen Brunson and the rest of those guys. I don't think you can get away with that with this version of what we see with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, I will say this. If Nembhard can hang with SGA, and if whether or not Nesmith is going to have the responsibility of handling SGA more or maybe handling Williams more, because I see that being more of a matchup where athleticism plays into Nesmith kind of bodying up Williams a little bit more and forcing Williams to probably be more aggressive, maybe take more shots, only if Nembhard can hang with SGA. And this is why it's such an intriguing matchup, Shaw. The way that SGA plays, his ball handling skills are so dynamically different than Jalen Brunson's. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, everyone is, he's the free throw merchant, all that other stuff. I want people to really understand and pay attention. He is the kind of guy who is much more decisive about going to where he wants to go in a north-south fashion that will put Nembhard and whoever is going to be on him on their heels. And if the Oklahoma City Thunder is moving like they are, Hartenstein, Holmgren, all those guys, that means that the Pacers have to be attentive, to the last person moving and cutting. Because when SGA gets inside, there is not a lot of room for error. It's not a question of, baiting and getting fouls. It's knowing that if SGA has gotten past who you have as your primary defender, all hands have to be on deck. It's even Haliburton. And I'm not saying Haliburton is a compromise defensively, but all of these guys can wind up getting cheap fouls because SGA will deliberately get to a place that will make your defense vulnerable. And that's what I'm intrigued by, because there is a maturation process that gets elevated now because you're not dealing with the same kind of backcourt play that you just finished playing in the 6-game series with the Indiana Pacers.
Well, it's interesting because, I'm going to not jump from your point, but I think when we talked about it in the first half of the show, the overall depth of this, right? So the depth is also going to come in the cross matching, and then how much do the true starters play, and do those cross matches take effect, right? Like, who does Hartenstein really guard, when on the Indiana side? If it's Turner, awesome, right? But is Siakam a great, is Chet a great matchup for Siakam? I don't know, right? So I think that might be more J Dub, who probably takes that assignment on a more regular basis. And then does that allow Chet to hang out on like a Nesmith per se? Like, you know what I mean? So those are things, but remember, they're going to play a majority of those guys. So which minutes are we going to see in terms of the cross matching? So when Toppin is in the game for Indiana, who is he guarding, right? You know, unfortunately, Jarvis Walker looks like he's going to be out for this final series, right? But does that force you to play Thomas Bryant, who wasn't looking so great in the first part of the Knicks series? And then is that something OKC can hunt on the other side? So, and the Thunder, conversely, they feel like all their guys can guard everybody, right? They don't care if Jason Wallace is out there. You know, Caruso, as stout as he is as a defender, he's obviously very switchable. That's where I think OKC seems to have the advantage, especially when you go to the bench, because once you get past that front five, so to speak, now I think the defensive side for Indiana switches towards OKC's favor, because I just don't think they're as versatile defensively, although they are very versatile offensively.
Watch if Dagnall unleashes Caruso on Haliburton. I feel like Tyrese Haliburton's gameplay to me is so important. You know, one of the things that was interesting, you know, with Pascal Siakam winning the Eastern Conference Finals MVP, I thought I thought it was apropos. I thought it was necessary. And if you're the Indiana Pacers, you're happy about that. You need an aggressive Pascal Siakam. I know everybody is focused on, you know, the rising stardom of Tyrese Haliburton and his clutch playmaking. But you're talking about playing a 7-game series, hopefully, against the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? If you're going to have any chance of winning, you need that version of Pascal Siakam that came out in games, games 3, 2, I think 2, 4, and game 6, right? You need that Pascal Siakam. That Pascal Siakam is aggressive. That Pascal Siakam creates matchup nightmares for the front court. That Pascal Siakam in transition is the kind of person that the Oklahoma City Thunder were hoping they weren't seeing from Julius Randle in that series that they just came from, who didn't show that, right? So if you are the Indiana Pacers, you know how it is. Sometimes you got to nudge someone to be like, I need to see the Hulk in you, bro. You know what I'm saying? I want to see you kind of Bruce Banner your way through this thing. And Pascal Siakam could easily do that, but at times he disappears. He cannot afford to disappear in this series. He, to me, is the X factor that I think people really need to pay attention to, because he is the one person on top and bottom end that can really affect first, second, and third levels of the Oklahoma City Thunder on both sides of the basketball. It doesn't mean that he's got to go out there and shot block or whatever the case may be, but rebounding, creating disruption, creating length, creating a shot, being a shot deterrent, that has to all come in play. And I'm not saying it's only on Siakam. What I'm saying is Siakam's energy and Siakam being included in that, to me, is just so important if we think that the Pacers have an opportunity to win this series.
Yeah, so I'll counter only with the notion of, you know, talking about OKC, we haven't really dove into the SGA aspect of it yet, but even sticking on the defense is like Dort. So Dort has that opportunity to really, you know, try to D up Siakam, I think, at times alongside Jalen Williams. And that's where I'm just very concerned about what OKC, like their ability to consistently switch and throw guys and not worry about it. Not feel like they're getting like they're at a disadvantage just because this ex defender is on them, whether they're smaller or not. Caruso, Dort, Williams, it doesn't really matter. Casey Wallace, like they just will find guys and feel like, you know what, we can live with this. And I think that's where Indiana is going to be different. So while Siakam has to play well, I think that's not to say a given, but it's kind of one of the, you know, sticking points of the series. I think it does become like, well, where else can Indiana get consistent play? Because if you feel like the main guys are going to struggle, you know, even if it's just efficiency per se, maybe they'll still get their numbers, but efficiently they may not. Then that's when Miles Turner comes into play. That's when Aaron Nesmith comes into play. And the last, 2-3 games of the series, Benedict Mathurin coming off the bench, you know, you talk about a free throw merchant. He would get into the line kind of ad nauseum and was really been able to be really impactful. So is that something, you know, Carlisle and the Pacers can tap into offensively when their main guys presumably are going to really be facing a tough sledding for the entirety of the series just because of switchability defensively. So I've been looking for Nesmith, Turner, and Mathurin to really, really figure out ways to step in here and have some games. And that's the beauty, I think, about the Indiana Pacers. It doesn't mean they all have to go off at the same time, but can one of them have a good game? And, while the other one is like, all right, tonight's an off night, but Neesmith pops like he did in game 1, 8 threes, which is obviously, miraculous. But does he, give you 17 to 18? And another night, Turner's, giving you almost 28. That's where I think Indiana is really going to have to figure this out. Toppin played well in game 6, especially in the second half. And I think that's where I think the Pacers have some semblance of an understanding, but I don't know if all their main guys are going to be able to go off in this series because I think OKC just so top heavy defensively.
Yeah. So real quick, and then Shaw, I want you to kind of give me your take on who are going to be the Rainmakers, in this series, like dudes that are just, they're looking, they'll probably have an opportunity really to go off. One of the things that I spoke about, and I even, I kind of mentioned this on X platforms and stuff like that. Like there were times where, watching the Pacers and the Knicks play was just kind of unwatchable. Not because I didn't like either of the teams, because I technically don't. But the reason why it was unwatchable is because shot selection and basketball IQ at times was just, I just couldn't understand it. Like, I guess it's like neither one of these teams wanted to win. You cannot do that against this Oklahoma City Thunder team. You just cannot. You have to be at the highest level of your understanding of the game and when a shot is a good shot and when a shot is not a good shot, because you're not going to be afforded too many opportunities to have those make or miss situations, right? My concern here, again, what I've seen from the Oklahoma City Thunder is that these guys are executing at a high level because they're reading and understanding the game. They know and they understand the moments of, when I should be basically getting 2 points or why I can go ahead and shoot that transition 3. You know what I'm saying? Like they feel and understand where the momentum shifts and changes. And if they roll the dice and take a risk on it, they're confident in saying, you know what, we own that. That's on us. But they, like throughout the course of their playoff run, what's impressed me about OKC, Shaw, I've never looked at them with this level of saying, oh my God, like, are you serious? Like, this is exactly what you think you're supposed to be doing, like at this moment in time, like as if like this is meant to happen, like you wanted this to happen. Like, no, like you're gifting the opposition a chance to probably win a game that they have no business winning. You know what I'm saying? And I felt that numerous times in the series against the Indiana Pacers, where you worked so hard, you stole 2 games from the New York Knicks, and yet your level of execution down the stretch, you even almost gifted it back to them. And I'm just like, you cannot do that against a team that really understands who they are, who they had to go through to get to this point. I'm just saying, like, if I want to buy into the Indiana Pacers making this a series, they can't pull the kind of stunts that they were pulling in this last series in the Eastern Conference Finals.
No, and I get that, right? They know that they're going to be the underdogs and that they're going to have to play not necessarily perfect basketball, but a mistake less basketball. I think it's just
don't use mistake free. It's just like,
yeah, I mean, it has to be limited because I think, you have to understand the beast you're going up against. OKC is going to turn you over, right? But just how many of those are, like as I said in the beginning, how many of those are live ball turnovers, versus like, all right, shot clock violations or whatever the case may be, or throwing the ball out of bounds per se. I don't want the Indiana Pacers to become timid in this series at all. I think they inherently need to be who they are and try to run the basketball and not go up against Oklahoma City's, set defense on a regular basis. But again, you have to do that with a certain level of care and caution. And I think that's where the depth of this team really does kind of come into play. That gives them more than a puncher's chance. And I think some of the odds makers are going to say in this situation. What I want to kind of like switch gears to real quick, though, is just your thought on Indiana and their ability to stop SGA. Like, what are you looking for SGA in this series to be brilliant, and that could ultimately lead to an OKC championship?
If SGA believes that he can basically beat Indiana's backcourt off the dribble, then ride that until they show you differently. I mean, literally ride that, because I think it just opens up the floodgates. Let's remember too, right? Like, again, the Indiana Pacers have had more of a wolf pack mentality defensively, which I think has afforded them the opportunity. And you could also make the argument in some respects that the New York Knicks kind of gifted that for them, like baited themselves because of their style of offense. They have way too many half-court oriented guys, weren't really good in spacing. And then when those opportunities came for them to make those half-court shots, it was in the hands of people that just were inconsistent. I don't think you'll have that kind of problem if I'm OKC, but it's all predicated on the aggressiveness of SGA. And when I say aggressiveness, I'm saying he doesn't have to take 20 shots in order for that to kind of happen. It's all about, if he's beating his man. One of the things that I was impressed by that I thought would have given the Minnesota Timberwolves a chance in that series was the level of aggressiveness that you saw from Alexander, from Walker Alexander, and then also from Anthony Edwards. There was a level of intensity of really getting up in SGA and forcing him to dance with the ball more rather than moving north-south. If SGA has made up his mind to go north-south, and he gets past the first defender, or maybe even gets around the screen to the second defender, that's putting guys like Siakam, guys like Turner on their heels. And I'm not saying that they're great defensively, but it will marginalize what they can give you defensively because they're not great front court stretch out extensive defenders once the guard gets past their teammates' backcourt. So that's where I'm concerned. But if I get an aggressive SGA, I mean, he can basically have lunch all day long in the paint with the Indiana Pacers because he can be that kind of guy if he chooses to.
Yeah, and I think the foul battle is going to be something that we need to watch, especially on the Indiana side. OKC is known for their physical defense, and they seemingly kind of get away, with some things here and there. But conversely, can you make SGA work? Can you run him through multiple screens without them being legal? Right? I can see Siakam and Turner trying to do something and then, sticking a leg out too far and then getting called for those illegal screens. But you got to run, SGA around on the defensive side and make him work. And, maybe that will hopefully tire him out on the offensive side where he's maybe not as potent. I don't know that will actually happen, but I think it's something they can attempt to do, at different points throughout the course of the series, because I'd much rather lose this series if I'm Indiana, with Jason Williams and Chet Holmgren and guys like that, going off, as opposed to SGA doing his MVP dance on me kind of throughout the course of a 7-game series. So they got to make SGA work on the defensive side of the basketball as well. And I think they have enough depth in guys in this where they'll be able to do that. Not necessarily great one-on-one guys. I don't think Nembhard and Nesmith are these guys, just try to take you off the dribble per se. But again, putting SGA in action with whoever he's guarding, because I think he's going to be guarding probably the lesser of the offensive, stars if you're on the Indiana side, but you got to get him involved one way or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Shaw, real quick, and then we have to make our predictions. Who is your rainmaker for both the Pacers and for the Oklahoma City Thunder? Aside from the star players, the SGAs and the Tyrese Haliburtons, who do you feel like has an opportunity to be a rainmaker in this series?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the aspect of it's two guys from Indiana really for me. And I don't want to discredit what TJ McConnell's been able to do in terms of when he comes in and changes the pace for the Pacers, as a backup point guard. But Turner should have a much better series here. Chet and Hartenstein they're not Cat. And while you can say that might be good for some reasons, Cat decided that, Turner, you cannot guard me on the perimeter. Like you have to respect my jumper in a way, but if I decide to put it on the floor, you have no hope. Chet and Hartenstein don't have those types of chops. He's not off the bounce. So I think Turner can have a more impactful series in this. And then I think conversely on the other guy on the Indiana side too, I think as the aforementioned Mathurin, which I don't need to kind of relegate that too. So I think those two guys from Indiana have to play well if the Pacers are going to, make this a long series. And then conversely for OKC, it's not necessarily an offensive thing for me. I think they can maintain the same level of defense with Caruso on the floor, with Cason Wallace on the floor. Like, is the defense, there's truly no drop off when, the Indiana offensive guys like the top ends and the Mathurins kind of come in. Can they still get that same level of defensive production? Not from their starters per se. So that's where it's kind of a tale of two teams really, where I think Indiana needs to figure out a way to tap in even more into their offensive chops, which I think is going to be a tough defense. While OKC needs to dig down into what they do best with their defense, especially with some of their supplemental and auxiliary guys.
Yeah, I like where you were going with that one. I'll just throw in one because you kind of already mentioned from the Indiana side. I'm going to go with Chet Holmgren for the Oklahoma City Thunder as a rainmaker. I really believe that he has an opportunity, one, to extend Miles Turner if Miles Turner has him, or maybe even Pascal Siakam. I think Chet Holmgren is moving quite nicely throughout the course of this NBA playoffs. He's given you a few 20-something plus point performances, hitting the three. And then also from a defensive perspective, bro, averaging 2 blocks per game, essentially. Like, I just feel like if he is on one and he is really complementing what we're expecting to see from SGA and Jay Williams, that's going to be a problem for the Indiana Pacers. This is way too much firepower coming from all aspects, every dynamic of the Oklahoma City Thunder. All right. So with that being said, Shaw, who you got? How many games?
Yeah, I'm struggling. Conventional wisdom and the odds maker says, this could be a good series, but maybe not necessarily a long one, right? And I think you'd say maybe OKC in 5 or 6 because you want to show respect to the Pacers or whatever. I don't know, man. I'm at my tipping point. I'm tired of doubting Indiana. I'm not so tired where I'm going to pick them to win the series, but I think they're going to have a better showing in this than many of the odds makers are giving them. So I'm going to tip my toe in the waters here and say OKC in 7 in a NBA Finals, an unexpected NBA Finals that we didn't expect to be a classic. But I think Indiana's going to show and prove in a way that many are probably still doubting them a little bit for. But I still got the Thunder winning the NBA championship, but I'm going to put OKC in 7. What about you?
Yeah, man, you're going to be having me on an island, man. You know what I'm saying? What was that dunk tank? Everyone's going to basically have me just swimming in the waters just by myself, right? Just look, man, I've been a fan of the Indiana Pacers as far as their resiliency, what they've shown. And I'm not going to poo-poo what they've done to get to this point. I am going to say, though, I don't know if they're going to be able to hang with this Oklahoma City Thunder team. I'm just watching this team, bro. And, forget all of this is the first championship that, they're since the KD, Westbrook, and Harden. No, forget all of that. They understand that this is their time. They understand that. I truly feel that they truly understand that. And I think if they don't get in their own heads, they know that they are really the better team in this series. Ultimately, what they cannot afford to do is what the Knicks allowed the Pacers to do. And I told you this, right? Do not let the Pacers take one on the road, right? Don't let them get one in MSG, because if you do that, it's a wrap, right? And not only did they take one, they took it twice, right? They took them twice, okay? Pacers are one of the best teams on the road. That being said, Oklahoma City understands this moment. They are not going to give the Indiana Pacers any level of needed oxygen except for what they can generate on their own. So they're going to have to work for it. They're not going to sit there and, be subject to the choke jobs or nothing like that. You're not going to see that with this OKC team. So, Misha, I'm going to say OKC in 6, but man, I really would not be surprised if it's a gentleman's sweep. I really would not be, because to me, defense wins championships, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, to me, have proven throughout this playoffs, their defense is for real against the teams that they have been playing against. And I just don't know. Carlisle's going to have to pull out a masterpiece to get these guys to break what the OKC Thunder has basically been throwing out here so far in this NBA playoffs.
I have nothing. I have no notes. I think 5 is where my heart really wants to go, but I just feel like Indiana.
The only reason why I'm saying that is the key is the first 2 games in OKC. If the Indiana Pacers show that they will hang around, they will throw it right back at OKC, then this is going to be a long series. But if OKC goes out and does what they basically have done to teams in those first 2 games of holding their home court, or against teams who are basically matched up like them, say like the Minnesota Timberwolves, this will be a quick series, because it's just it's a tough hill to climb, man, when a team is locked in defensively. You don't have the luxury of suddenly just figuring it out of how you're going to basically stop them from doing what they were able to come out and execute that they've been doing all series long. And that's why I think not to buy it.
What can ultimately happen, in Indiana's favor, is if they can actually run Hartenstein and Holmgren off the court.
They've got to run them. Exactly. They got to run them thin. They have to run them to the point where you're forcing OKC to have to figure out offensively how to turn things up, which is out of their element. I'm not saying that OKC can, again, I'm not saying they can't score. But what I'm saying is they know they don't have to score 120 points for them to beat you. So if you're figuring out a way to push them to think that you got to score 120 points, you may actually have the edge. And we'll see if the Indiana Pacers can do that.
Yeah. Well, it'd be great to see 2 great coaches, Dagnall and Carlisle, 2 great point guards, elite guards in Haliburton and SGA, and role players and supplemental stars and Siakam and J-Dub and Chet and Holmgren. And there's a lot of great storylines here. So fans, move into this.
Great team basketball matchups of NBA finals that we have seen in the last 7 years. And I'm glad that one of these teams will deservedly hoist the trophy for the first time, either for the OKC Thunder or at all. Like the Indiana Pacers have not won an NBA championship, right?
Yeah. Not that I'm aware of it.
Yeah, not ABA since if they were ABA, right? Okay.
Yeah. So again, the Thunder don't claim the Sonics championship, so it would be the first Thunder championship for sure. Yeah. Watch this series, fams. Like, just watch it and tap in. I think it could be better than expected, but maybe ultimately the outcome is predetermined, so to speak. But I think the Pacers team is going to surprise some folks here in the NBA Finals a little bit too. Shout out to Haliburton, man, and shout out to Hallie's dad a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome back, man. Welcome back. Awesome show, man. Awesome preview. And listen, man, we definitely want to hear your thoughts. You know what I'm saying? We appreciate everybody who's been riding with us through this incredible wave of NBA performances and games and playoffs. And now that we're here with the NBA Finals, I know we're just that much closer, but hopefully you'll continue to enjoy that ride with us. For the Baseline, Callie Warren Show, we appreciate you guys. We do. Enjoy the NBA Finals, and we'll catch up with you next time.